The moment Rebecca Daniels stepped off the stagecoach in Evanston, Wyoming Territory, in the spring of 1878, three women grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the general store with urgent whispers about the dangers that awaited any unmarried woman in cattle country. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to accept a teaching position at the small schoolhouse, and these were the first townspeople she encountered, their faces lined with genuine concern and something else she could not quite identify. "You must understand, dear," said Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, her gloved hand tight on Rebecca's sleeve. "These cowboys are not like the gentlemen back east. They are rough, untamed men who spend months alone on the range with nothing but cattle and each other. They drink, they fight, they curse, and they have no understanding of proper behavior around a lady." Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry with her husband, nodded vigorously. "My husband has to wash blood out of their shirts every Saturday night after the saloon fights." "You must be very careful, Miss Daniels, very careful." The third woman, a widow named Mrs. Thornton who owned the boarding house where Rebecca would be staying, leaned in close. "There is one cowboy in particular you should avoid, Quinton Blake. He works at the largest ranch outside town, the Triple Creek. He is the quietest of them all, which makes him the most dangerous in my opinion. You never know what he is thinking behind those eyes." Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm spring air. She had left Boston to escape a suffocating life of tea parties and suitors her father had chosen, men who saw her as nothing more than a decorative addition to their homes. She wanted freedom, purpose, a chance to make a difference by teaching children on the frontier. But perhaps she had traded one set of problems for another. "I appreciate your concern," Rebecca said, gently extracting her arm from Mrs. Patterson's grip. "I assure you I will be careful and professional. I am here to teach, nothing more." The women exchanged glances that suggested they had heard such confidence before and seen it crumble. They helped her carry her 2 trunks to the boarding house, a neat 2-story structure painted white with blue shutters that reminded Rebecca almost painfully of home. Mrs. Thornton showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor with a window overlooking the main street. "The school is just 3 buildings down," Mrs. Thornton said, pointing. "You will start on Monday. That gives you 3 days to settle in and prepare. I serve breakfast at 7, dinner at noon when you return, and supper at 6. No men allowed upstairs under any circumstances." Rebecca nodded, already feeling the weight of frontier propriety settling over her like a heavy quilt. She spent the rest of that Thursday unpacking her belongings, arranging her books on the small shelf, and hanging her dresses in the narrow wardrobe. She had brought 6 dresses suitable for teaching, all in sensible colors with high collars and long sleeves. Her mother had wept when she packed, certain Rebecca was traveling to her doom. On Friday morning, Rebecca walked to the schoolhouse to assess what materials she would have to work with. The building was smaller than she expected. Just one room with a pot-bellied stove in the corner, rows of mismatched desks, and a large slate board on the front wall. The previous teacher, she had been told, had left suddenly to return east after only 2 months. No one had explained why. She was sweeping the floor, her sleeves rolled up and her dark hair coming loose from its pins, when she heard boots on the wooden steps outside. Rebecca turned as the door opened, expecting perhaps the school board chairman or a parent. Instead, a tall man in work-worn clothes stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, backlit by the morning sun so she could not see his face clearly. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice surprisingly soft and measured. "I did not mean to startle you. I am Quinton Blake. I work at the Triple Creek Ranch." Rebecca felt her heart skip as she remembered the warnings. This was the man Mrs. Thornton had specifically told her to avoid. She gripped the broom handle tighter, studying him as he stepped inside. He was indeed tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who worked hard every day. His face was weathered but young, probably only a few years older than her own 22 years. He had dark brown hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. What struck her most was not his appearance but his demeanor. He moved carefully, as though afraid of taking up too much space, and kept his distance near the door. "Mr. Blake," she said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I am Miss Daniels, the new teacher. How may I help you?" He turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed almost nervous. "I heard the school had a new teacher coming. I wanted to welcome you to Evanston and to ask about something if you have a moment." Rebecca waited, her mind racing through the warnings she had received. Was this some kind of trick? A test of her resolve? "I know how to read some," Quinton continued, his eyes on his hat rather than on her. "But not well. I can write my name and a few words, but that is about all. I was wondering if you might consider teaching an evening class for adults who never had much schooling. There are several of us ranch hands who would like to learn. We would pay you, of course." This was not what Rebecca had expected. She studied him more carefully, noting the genuine humility in his posture, the way he seemed almost ashamed of his request. "That is a very admirable goal, Mr. Blake," she said slowly, "but I have only just arrived. I need to focus on preparing for the children first." "Of course, madam, I understand." He placed his hat back on his head and nodded to her. "Welcome to Evanston. I hope you will be happy here." He turned to leave, and Rebecca found herself speaking before she had fully thought through her words. "Perhaps in a few weeks, once I have settled into a routine with the children, we could discuss it further." Quinton turned back, and his face transformed with a smile that was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "That would be wonderful, Miss Daniels. Thank you for considering it." He tipped his hat and left, his boots echoing on the wooden steps as he descended. Rebecca stood alone in the schoolhouse, confused by the encounter. This man bore no resemblance to the dangerous cowboy she had been warned about. He had been respectful, soft-spoken, and humble. She shook her head, reminding herself that she had only just met him. Perhaps the women of the town knew something she did not. Saturday, Rebecca spent organizing the schoolhouse and creating lesson plans for her first week. She had been told to expect about 15 students ranging from ages 6 to 14. Children of ranchers, shopkeepers, and the few other residents of Evanston, who valued education enough to send their children regularly. She prepared reading primers, arithmetic problems, and a history lesson about the founding of the United States. On Sunday, Rebecca attended church services in the small white chapel at the end of town. The interior was plain but well-maintained, with simple wooden pews and a pulpit made from local timber. She sat with Mrs. Thornton and observed the congregation, noting the clear division between the townspeople who sat in the front pews and the ranch workers who stood in the back or sat in the last few rows. She spotted Quinton Blake immediately, standing against the back wall with several other men in clean but worn clothing. He listened intently to the sermon about kindness and charity, his expression thoughtful. When the service ended and the congregation filtered out into the sunshine, several of the town women immediately surrounded Rebecca, as though forming a protective barrier. "Remember what we told you," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Cowboys are rough and wild, especially after they have been drinking. Stay away from the saloon and be very careful about whom you speak to." Rebecca nodded politely, but she found herself glancing toward the back of the church, where Quinton Blake was helping an elderly man down the steps. his hand steady and his manner gentle. The contrast between what she was being told and what she was observing was growing more pronounced. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made Rebecca wake before dawn. She dressed carefully in a navy blue dress with white collar and cuffs, pinned her chestnut hair into a neat bun, and ate a quick breakfast before walking to the schoolhouse. She arrived an hour early to make sure everything was perfect. The students began arriving at 8 o'clock, some walking from town, others dropped off by parents in wagons. Rebecca greeted each one at the door, learning their names and ages. There was Emma, age 7, with blonde braids and a shy smile. Tommy and Timothy, twin boys of 9 who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Sarah, age 12, who carried herself with the seriousness of someone far older. And 11 more children, each with their own personalities and challenges. The morning went reasonably well. The children were curious about their new teacher from Boston, and Rebecca found that most of them were eager to learn despite varying levels of previous education. Some could read simple words while others were just learning their letters. She organized them into groups and moved between them, offering help and encouragement. At noon, the children pulled out lunch pails and Rebecca dismissed them to eat outside in the pleasant spring weather. She sat at her desk, eating the sandwich Mrs. Thornton had packed for her when she noticed a rider approaching the schoolhouse. Her stomach tightened as she recognized Quinton Blake on a bay horse. He dismounted and tied his horse to the rail outside, then climbed the steps with something in his hands. Rebecca met him at the door. "Miss Daniels," he said with a nod. "I hope I am not disturbing your dinner. I was riding into town on an errand for the ranch, and I thought you might like these." He held out a small bouquet of wildflowers, purple and yellow blooms that must have been gathered from the open range. Rebecca stared at the flowers, then at him. "Mr. Blake, I do not think it is appropriate for you to bring me gifts." A flush crept up his neck. "I meant no disrespect, madam. I just thought they might brighten up the schoolhouse. For the children, you understand. My mother always said flowers made a place feel more welcoming." He held them out again, his eyes sincere. Rebecca hesitated, then took the flowers. "Thank you. That is thoughtful. I will put them in water." "There is a jar in the cupboard that the last teacher used," Quinton said. "I fixed the handle on it last month before she left. It should hold water now." "You did work on the schoolhouse?" Rebecca asked, surprised. "Yes, madam. The school board does not have much money, so some of us volunteers help with repairs when we can. I fixed the roof over the winter and replaced some of the floorboards that were rotted." He glanced around the room with what looked like pride. "I want the children to have a good place to learn." Rebecca found herself softening despite her intentions to remain distant and professional. "That is very commendable, Mr. Blake." "Just Quinton, madam, if you do not mind. Mr. Blake was my father and he has been gone a long time now." He looked like he wanted to say more but thought better of it. "I will leave you to your dinner. Good day, Miss Daniels." He was gone before she could respond, riding back toward the open range on his bay horse. Rebecca found the jar in the cupboard, filled it with water from the pump outside, and arranged the wildflowers on her desk. When the children returned from their lunch break, little Emma immediately noticed them. "Those are pretty, Miss Daniels. Where did you get them?" "A gentleman brought them," Rebecca said carefully. "He thought they would make the schoolhouse more cheerful." "Was it Quinton?" asked Sarah, the 12-year-old. "He is always doing nice things like that. He helped my papa fix our barn door last month and did not even want any payment." Rebecca filed this information away, her confusion about Quinton Blake growing deeper. That evening at supper, she carefully broached the subject with Mrs. Thornton. "I met Mr. Blake again today. He brought flowers for the schoolhouse." Mrs. Thornton's face pinched with worry. "You must be very careful, Miss Daniels. Cowboys may seem charming at first, but they are rough and wild underneath. Quinton Blake especially. He is too quiet, too controlled. That kind always has something brewing beneath the surface." "Has he ever done anything violent?" Rebecca asked directly. Mrs. Thornton paused. "Well, no, not that I have heard specifically. But he is a cowboy, and cowboys fight and drink and carry on. It is their nature. You cannot trust them." Rebecca went to bed that night more confused than ever. Everyone warned her about cowboys in general and Quinton Blake in particular, but no one could give her a specific reason why. All she had seen from him was courtesy, kindness, and genuine humility. She resolved to reserve judgment and focus on her teaching. The week passed in a blur of lessons, struggling students, small victories, and the exhaustion that came with managing 15 children of different ages and abilities. By Friday afternoon, Rebecca felt like she had been teaching for months rather than days. The children filed out, chattering about their weekend plans, and Rebecca sat at her desk to grade their arithmetic assignments. She was surprised when Sarah lingered behind, clearly wanting to say something but hesitant. "Yes, Sarah," Rebecca prompted gently. "Miss Daniels, I heard my mama talking to Mrs. Patterson about warning you away from the Cowboys, especially Quinton." "That is not really something we should discuss," Rebecca said carefully. "But it is not fair," Sarah burst out, her young face flushed with indignation. "Quinton is the nicest man in this whole town. When my papa got kicked by a horse last year and could not work for 2 months, Quinton brought us food every week from his own wages. He did not tell anyone, and he made me promise not to say anything because he did not want Papa to feel bad about accepting charity. He just said everyone needs help sometimes." Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. That was very kind of him. "He is always doing things like that," Sarah continued, as if a dam had broken. "He helped old Mr. Chen repair his laundry when it flooded. He taught Tommy and Timothy how to fish so they could help feed their family. Last winter, he gave his coat to a traveling family who stopped in town with nothing but the clothes on their backs. He walked back to the ranch in the snow without it." "Why do people warn against him then?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious now. Sarah shrugged. "I think because he is quiet and keeps to himself mostly. People do not understand him, so they make up stories. And because he is a cowboy and everyone knows cowboys are supposed to be rough and wild. But Quinton is not like that. He is gentle. He rescued a kitten from drowning in the creek last month and found it a home. What kind of rough, wild man does that?" Rebecca thanked Sarah for sharing and told her to head home before her parents worried. After the girl left, Rebecca sat in the empty schoolhouse, thinking about everything she had learned. The wildflowers on her desk were starting to fade, but they had indeed made the room more cheerful all week. She found herself looking forward to Monday, though she could not quite admit to herself why. The weekend was quiet. Rebecca spent Saturday writing letters to her family back in Boston, assuring them she was safe and happy in her new position. She did not mention the warnings about cowboys or the confusing feelings she was developing about a certain ranch hand. Sunday church service was much like the previous week, with Quinton standing in the back, listening intently and helping anyone who needed it. Monday morning, Rebecca arrived at the schoolhouse to find that someone had left a stack of firewood by the door, neatly cut and split, perfect for the stove when the weather turned cold again. There was no note, but she suspected she knew who had left it. The routine of teaching became more comfortable as the weeks passed. Rebecca developed a rhythm with her students, learning their strengths and weaknesses, celebrating their progress, and gently correcting their mistakes. She grew fond of all of them, from shy little Emma to the mischievous twins to serious Sarah. Quinton Blake appeared occasionally, always with some small kindness. He fixed a broken window. He brought a new rope for the bell. He left books that he said the ranch owner's wife was throwing out, thinking the children might enjoy them. Each time, he was respectful, keeping his distance, never assuming any familiarity beyond polite conversation. Rebecca found herself thinking about him more than was probably appropriate. She noticed things about him during church services. The way he sang the hymns in a surprisingly good baritone, the patience he showed with children who ran past him, the respectful attention he paid to the sermon. She noticed that he wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, all carefully mended. She noticed that his boots were worn but always clean. She noticed that he never went to the saloon on Saturday nights like the other cowboys, according to Sarah, who seemed to be Rebecca's unofficial source of information about Quinton. Where does he go on Saturday nights? Rebecca asked once, trying to sound casual. He stays at the ranch and reads, Sarah said. Or he walks into the hills and just sits looking at the stars. My papa sees him sometimes when he is checking the cattle. Says Quinton is the most peaceful man he has ever known. 6 weeks after Rebecca arrived in Evanston, Quinton approached her after church on a beautiful Sunday in late May. Miss Daniels, he said, hat in hand as always. I was wondering if you had given any more thought to teaching evening classes. I have spoken to several men at the ranch, and we would all like to learn to read and write better. We could meet twice a week after your regular school day, if that would not be too much trouble. Rebecca had been expecting this question and had already made her decision. I would be happy to teach evening classes, Quinton. Shall we say Tuesday and Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock? His face lit up with that transformative smile again. That would be perfect, Miss Daniels. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to us. I think I do, Rebecca said softly. Education opens doors. It gives people choices they might not otherwise have. That is exactly right, Quinton said, his gray-green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I want to be more than just a ranch hand. I want to be able to read books and understand the world beyond these hills. I want to write letters to my sister back in Kansas without having to ask someone else to write them for me. I want to matter. You already matter, Rebecca said before she could stop herself. You matter very much to this community, whether they acknowledge it or not. Quinton looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Thank you for saying that, Miss Daniels. It means a great deal coming from you. They stood in the churchyard, the spring sunshine warm on their shoulders, and Rebecca realized that something had changed between them. There was an understanding now, a connection that went beyond teacher and student or townswoman and cowboy. It scared her a little, but it also filled her with a strange excitement. The first evening class took place on Tuesday night with 5 students. Quinton, 2 other ranch hands named James and Thomas, the blacksmith's assistant named Peter, and surprisingly, Mr. Chen from the laundry. All of them were grown men who worked hard all day and came to the schoolhouse tired but eager to learn. Rebecca started with basics, assessing their skill levels. Quinton could read simple words and write his name. James could barely read at all. Thomas was somewhere in between. Peter had decent reading skills but terrible handwriting. Mr. Chen knew how to read and write some English but wanted to improve. She organized lessons that would help all of them, using materials that would be relevant to their lives. They read from newspapers about cattle prices and weather forecasts. They practiced writing letters to family members. They worked on arithmetic that would help them keep track of their wages and make sure they were being paid fairly. Quinton proved to be a dedicated student, staying after the others left to practice his letters and ask questions about words he had encountered. Rebecca found these quiet moments together both thrilling and terrifying. She was violating every rule of propriety by being alone with him in the schoolhouse after dark, but she could not bring herself to send him away when he was so earnest in his desire to learn. "Why is education so important to you?" she asked one evening after he had been practicing the same sentence for 20 minutes, determined to get his handwriting neat and even. Quinton set down his pencil and looked at her thoughtfully. "My mother could read, but my father could not. She tried to teach us children, but we moved around so much following work that I never got much schooling. After my mother died when I was 12, my father just gave up on everything except survival. He worked himself to death by the time I was 16, and I have been on my own ever since." "I am sorry," Rebecca said softly. "That must have been very difficult." "It was," Quinton admitted. "But it taught me that I did not want to live the way he did, angry and bitter and feeling like the world had cheated him. I want more than that. I want to understand things. I want to be able to make choices based on knowledge, not just on what someone tells me is the only way." Rebecca felt her heart swell with admiration for this man who had survived so much hardship, yet remained gentle and kind. "You are going to achieve great things, Quinton. I truly believe that." He met her eyes, and in the lamplight of the schoolhouse, she saw something in his gaze that made her pulse race. "You are like an angel, Miss Daniels. You came to this rough town and you are making it better just by being here. You are making me better." "Rebecca," she whispered. "My name is Rebecca." "Rebecca," he repeated, and the way he said her name, soft and reverent, made her feel like she was hearing it for the first time. They sat in the quiet schoolhouse, the lamp flickering between them, and Rebecca knew she was falling in love with this cowboy, who was supposed to be rough and wild, but who was actually the gentlest man she had ever met. Word of the evening classes spread, and by the third week, Rebecca had 8 adult students. The school board was pleased with her initiative, though some of the town women expressed disapproval that she was spending so much time with rough cowboys. Rebecca ignored the whispers, focusing on her students and the progress they were making. She also ignored the way her heart leaped every time Quinton walked into the schoolhouse. She ignored how she had started taking extra care with her appearance on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She ignored the fact that she looked for him at church services and felt disappointed on the rare Sundays when he could not attend because of ranch work. But she could not ignore the way he looked at her, with a tenderness and respect that made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced with the suitable gentleman back in Boston. Those men had seen her as a prize to be won. Quinton saw her as a person to be treasured. In mid-June, a traveling merchant came through Evanston with a wagon full of goods. Rebecca went to look at his wares, hoping to find some new books for the schoolhouse. She was examining a copy of Ivanhoe when she heard raised voices nearby. "I told you the price is 50 cents, not 40, the merchant was saying angrily to a young Mexican couple with a baby. "If you cannot pay, do not waste my time." "Please, senor," the young woman said desperately. "Our baby needs the medicine. We have only 40 cents. It is all we have." "Not my problem," the merchant said coldly. "Move along." Rebecca was about to intervene when someone else did it first. Quinton Blake appeared from the crowd, pulled 10 cents from his pocket and handed it to the merchant. "Now they have 50 cents, he said quietly. The merchant took the money grudgingly and gave the young couple a bottle of medicine. They tried to thank Quinton, but he had already melted back into the crowd. Rebecca found him a few minutes later, standing by his horse. "That was very kind of you," she said. Quinton looked startled to see her. "It was nothing, just 10 cents. "It was 10 cents you probably could not spare," Rebecca said gently. Sarah told me you barely keep any of your wages. You are always giving money to people who need it more. He looked uncomfortable with the praise. I do not need much. Just enough for food and a place to sleep. Money sitting in my pocket does not do anyone any good. Most men would not think that way, Rebecca observed. Maybe I am not most men, Quinton said with a slight smile. Then his expression turned serious. Rebecca, I know I am just a cowboy with no education and no prospects beyond working cattle for the rest of my life. I know the town women warn you about me and tell you I am rough and wild. But I need you to know that I would never do anything to harm you or disrespect you. You are the finest person I have ever met, and I am honored just to be your student. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. You are not just anything, Quinton Blake. You are one of the best men I have ever known, regardless of how much education you have or what you do for work. They stood together in the busy street, people moving around them, and Rebecca knew that she was completely in love with this gentle cowboy who called her an angel. She also knew that acting on those feelings would cause a scandal that could cost her job and her reputation. But in that moment, she did not care about any of that. Would you like to go for a walk with me on Sunday after church? She asked, her heart pounding. Quinton's eyes widened. Are you sure? People will talk. Let them, Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. I would like to spend time with you, Quinton, if you would like the same. I would like nothing more, he said softly. Nothing more in the whole world. That Sunday, after church services, Rebecca and Quinton walked together along the creek that ran behind the town. They stayed in sight of other people, maintaining propriety, but just being together felt thrilling and transgressive. Quinton told her about growing up in Kansas, about his mother's love of reading, and how she used to make up stories to tell the children at night. Rebecca told him about Boston, about the suffocating expectations and the hollow conversations that never touched on anything real or meaningful. Do you miss it? Quinton asked. The fine things, the society. Not even a little bit, Rebecca said honestly. I feel more alive here, teaching children who truly want to learn, than I ever did at fancy parties where everyone said the same empty words. They walked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Quinton insisted on walking Rebecca back to the boarding house, where Mrs. Thornton waited on the porch with a face like a thundercloud. Miss Daniels, might I have a word with you? The landlady said coldly. Quinton tipped his hat and left, but not before giving Rebecca a look of concern. She climbed the porch steps with her head high. I must tell you that I am very disappointed, Mrs. Thornton began. I warned you about cowboys, specifically about Quinton Blake, and yet you deliberately disobeyed all advice and good sense by spending the afternoon alone with him. We were not alone, Rebecca said calmly. We walked along the creek where anyone could see us. We did nothing improper. The impropriety is in being with him at all, Mrs. Thornton snapped. He is a cowboy, Miss Daniels. They are rough and wild, and they will take advantage of any opportunity. I thought you were a sensible girl, but clearly I was mistaken. Rebecca felt her temper rise, something that rarely happened. With all due respect, Mrs. Thornton, I have asked everyone in this town to give me a specific reason why I should avoid Quinton Blake. No one can give me one. They just repeat that cowboys are rough and wild as if it is a fact of nature. But Quinton has been nothing but gentle and kind to me and to everyone else in this town. He volunteers his time to help people. He gives away his money to those in need. He is learning to read and write because he wants to better himself. What exactly about that is rough and wild? Mrs. Thornton sputtered, her face flushing. He is not of your class, Miss Daniels. He is not suitable. Suitable, Rebecca laughed, though there was no humor in it. I left Boston to escape men who were suitable. Men who had money and position but no kindness, no compassion, no genuine care for anyone but themselves. Quinton Blake is worth 10 of those suitable men. You are ruining your reputation, Mrs. Thornton warned. The school board will hear of this. Then they will hear of it, Rebecca said. I have done nothing wrong, and I will not be bullied into avoiding someone simply because of prejudice and unfounded rumors. Good evening, Mrs. Thornton. She went inside before the landlady could respond, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She had meant every word. Quinton Blake was worth defending, worth risking her reputation for, worth everything. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the schoolhouse to find the school board chairman, Mr. Whitmore, waiting for her. He was a stern man who owned the dry goods store, and his expression was grave. Miss Daniels, I have received some concerning reports about your conduct. I assume you mean my walk with Mr. Blake yesterday, Rebecca said steadily. It was entirely proper. We were in full view of others at all times. It is not just about propriety, Mr. Whitmore said. It is about the example you set for the children. We cannot have the school teacher consorting with cowboys. Consorting, Rebecca repeated, her voice sharp. I took a walk with a student from my evening class, a man who is working hard to improve himself through education. If anything, I would think that sets an excellent example for the children. Mr. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. Nevertheless, there have been complaints. Some parents are concerned. Which parents? Rebecca challenged. Because the children love their lessons, and I have heard nothing but positive feedback about their progress. I have also received praise for starting the evening classes. So who exactly is complaining? Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Thornton, and several other ladies of the town, Mr. Whitmore admitted. They feel that your association with Blake is inappropriate. Association, Rebecca said, feeling her temper rising again. I am teaching him to read and write just as I teach their children. The only difference is that he is a grown man who works as a cowboy. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, has Quinton Blake ever done anything to deserve this treatment? Has he committed any crime, caused any trouble? Or is his only offense being a working man who wants to better himself? Mr. Whitmore was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. No, Blake has always been a decent sort, but you must understand the position this puts the school board in. We have to answer to the community. Then answer to the whole community, Rebecca said firmly. Not just the wealthy women who have nothing better to do than gossip. Ask the parents whose children are actually in my class. Ask Sarah's father, who Quinton helped when he was injured. Ask the Chen family, who Quinton helped after the flood. Ask anyone who actually knows him rather than those who just judge him based on his occupation. Mr. Whitmore looked tired. I will take your words under advisement, Miss Daniels, but please be careful. Your position here is not as secure as you might think. After he left, Rebecca sat at her desk, shaking with anger and fear. She had perhaps been too bold, risked too much. But she could not bring herself to regret defending Quinton. He deserved to be defended. The children began arriving, and Rebecca pushed her worries aside to focus on teaching. But during the lunch break, Sarah approached her with a serious expression. Miss Daniels, my papa heard that Mr. Whitmore came to talk to you this morning. He wanted you to know that he thinks you are the best teacher we have ever had, and if the school board tries to dismiss you, he will fight it. He said a lot of the other parents feel the same way. Rebecca felt tears of gratitude well up. Thank you, Sarah. Please tell your father I appreciate his support very much. That evening was a Tuesday, which meant evening classes. Rebecca half expected none of her students to show up, fearing association with her would cause them problems. But at 6 o'clock, all 8 of her adult students filed into the schoolhouse with Quinton coming last. He approached her desk with a worried expression. "Rebecca, I heard what happened. I am so sorry. I never meant to cause you trouble. If you want me to stop coming to class, I understand." "Absolutely not," Rebecca said firmly. "You have every right to be here, and I have every right to teach you. I will not let small-minded gossip dictate who I spend time with or who I teach." "You are the bravest person I know," Quinton said quietly, his eyes full of admiration and something deeper. "And I am falling in love with you. I know I have no right to say that. I know I have nothing to offer you, but I cannot keep pretending I feel any differently." Rebecca's breath caught. The other students were settling into their seats, not paying attention to the quiet conversation at the front of the room. She looked up at Quinton, at his honest face and gentle eyes, and made a decision. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And you have every right to say that, just as I have every right to return those feelings." Quinton's face transformed with joy, though he maintained proper distance given the other people in the room. "You mean that? Truly, truly," Rebecca confirmed. "Now take your seat, Mr. Blake. We have lessons to complete." He grinned and went to his desk, and Rebecca taught that evening's lesson with a light heart despite the troubles swirling around them. When class ended and the other students had left, Quinton lingered as he often did. "What happens now?" he asked. "I do not want you to lose your position because of me." "Then we will be careful and proper," Rebecca said. "No more walks alone, not even in view of others. No conversations that anyone could misconstrue. You will be my student and nothing more in public. But privately, in our hearts, we will know the truth." "I can do that," Quinton agreed, "for as long as necessary. I would wait forever for you, Rebecca." "It will not be forever," Rebecca promised, though she was not sure how she would keep that promise. The next few weeks were difficult. The town's disapproval of Rebecca's association with Quinton simmered just below the surface of every interaction. Women she had thought were becoming friends turned cold. Mrs. Thornton made pointed comments about proper behavior at every meal. Even some of the parents looked at her with suspicion when they dropped off their children. But the children still loved her, and her adult students remained loyal. More importantly, the parents who actually knew Quinton began to speak up in Rebecca's defense. Sarah's father made a point of thanking Rebecca publicly after church one Sunday for the excellent education his daughter was receiving. The blacksmith, whose assistant Peter was one of Rebecca's evening students, told anyone who would listen that the evening classes were the best thing to happen to Evanston in years. Quinton and Rebecca maintained careful propriety in public, but the twice-weekly evening classes gave them precious time together, even if it had to be shared with other students. Quinton's reading and writing improved rapidly. He had a quick mind and absorbed information like a dry sponge. By the end of June, he could read the newspaper with only occasional help and write letters that were legible and well composed. One Thursday evening in early July, after the other students had left, Quinton showed Rebecca something he had been working on. "I wrote this," he said shyly, handing her a piece of paper covered in his careful handwriting. "It is not very good, but I wanted you to have it." Rebecca read the words, her eyes filling with tears. "You are the angel who saved me from darkness. You taught me that I could be more than what I was born to be. You showed me kindness when the world showed me hardness. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I love you with everything I am and everything I hope to become. Yours always, Quinton." "This is beautiful," Rebecca whispered. "Quinton, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." "I meant every word," he said earnestly. "You are my angel, Rebecca. You saved me." Rebecca carefully folded the paper and held it to her heart. "You saved yourself by having the courage to ask for help, but I am honored to have been part of your journey." They stood close together in the quiet schoolhouse, close enough that Rebecca could feel the warmth radiating from him. She wanted to step forward to feel his arms around her, but she held back. They had to be careful. Too much was at stake. As if reading her thoughts, Quinton said, "I am saving money. I have almost enough to buy a small piece of land. The ranch owner knows of some property for sale near the creek, good land for a small homestead. If I could prove that I am more than just a drifting cowboy, if I could show that I have prospects and a future, maybe then the town would accept me courting you properly." Rebecca's heart swelled. "You are already more than just a drifting cowboy, but I understand what you are saying. A homestead would give you independence and stability." "I want to be worthy of you," Quinton said simply. "I want to be able to offer you a real home and a real future, not just the life of a ranch hand's wife." "You are already worthy," Rebecca insisted. "Your worth is not determined by how much land you own or how much money you have. Your worth is in your character, your kindness, your gentle heart. Do not ever doubt that." Quinton reached out and gently touched her cheek, the first time they had touched beyond a handshake. "How did I get so lucky as to have you walk into my life?" "I am the lucky one," Rebecca said, leaning into his touch for just a moment before stepping back. "Now go, before someone sees your horse outside and starts more rumors." He left reluctantly, and Rebecca locked up the schoolhouse, holding his letter close to her heart. The summer heat intensified, and with it came tension in the town. A group of young cowboys from a neighboring ranch came through Evanston one Saturday night and caused trouble at the saloon, fighting and breaking furniture. The incident reinforced the town's prejudices about cowboys being rough and wild, and Rebecca felt the disapproval directed at her intensify, even though Quinton had nothing to do with the troublemakers. Mrs. Patterson made a point of telling Rebecca about the incident in great detail. "You see now what I meant about cowboys, Miss Daniels. They are violent and unpredictable. You are playing with fire by associating with Quinton Blake. He may seem calm now, but that is just a mask. Underneath, he is just like those other men." Rebecca was tired of holding her tongue. Quinton was not even in town on Saturday night. He was at the ranch, doing his job. He has never been in a saloon fight, never caused any trouble of any kind. When will you accept that your prejudice against him is based on nothing but his occupation? It is based on common sense, Mrs. Patterson snapped. "Cowboys are rough and wild. It is simply a fact." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "What is a fact is that some men are rough and wild regardless of what they do for a living. I have met so-called gentlemen in Boston who were far crueler and more dangerous than any cowboy. Judging someone based on their job rather than their character is both foolish and unjust." She walked away before Mrs. Patterson could respond, her hands shaking with anger. She was so tired of fighting this battle, tired of defending Quinton to people who had already made up their minds, tired of hiding her feelings for fear of losing her position. That afternoon, Rebecca went for a walk alone, needing to clear her head. She headed toward the creek, finding a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree. She sat on the bank, watching the water flow past, and tried to figure out what to do. "Miss Daniels." She turned to find Quinton approaching on foot, leading his horse. He looked concerned. "I saw you from the ridge. You looked upset. Is everything all right?" Rebecca was supposed to maintain distance, supposed to be careful about being seen alone with him. But in that moment she did not care. "No, everything is not all right. I am tired, Quinton. Tired of the whispers and the judgment. Tired of people telling me you are rough and wild when you are the gentlest man I have ever known. Tired of hiding how I feel about you." Quinton tied his horse to a tree and sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectable distance. "I am sorry. This is all my fault." If I had never approached you that first day at the schoolhouse, you would not be going through this." "Do not say that," Rebecca said fiercely. "Do not ever say that. Meeting you, knowing you, falling in love with you, that is the best thing that has happened to me. I would go through all of this 100 times over rather than not have you in my life." "Rebecca," Quinton breathed, and the love in his voice was unmistakable. "I want to make this right. I want to be able to court you properly, openly, without causing you trouble. Tell me what to do." "I do not know," Rebecca admitted. "Part of me wants to say we should stop seeing each other, give the gossip time to die down. But I cannot bear the thought of not seeing you twice a week, of not hearing about your progress, of not having those precious moments when it is just us and the learning we share." "Then do not," Quinton said. "Do not give up on us. We will be patient. We will be careful. And eventually, the town will see what I see when I look at you, an angel who makes everything better just by being here. They will realize that what we have is good and right and worthy of respect." "You have such faith," Rebecca said with a sad smile. "I have faith in us," Quinton corrected. "I have faith that love is stronger than prejudice. I have faith that the truth will win out eventually." They sat together by the creek, not touching but close enough that Rebecca could feel the connection between them like a physical thing. Finally, as the sun began to set, Quinton stood and offered her his hand to help her up. "Let me walk you back to town," he said. "People can think what they want, but I will not let you walk back alone as it gets dark." They walked together in the fading light, and Rebecca felt her resolve strengthen. She loved this man, and she would not give him up, no matter what the town thought. August brought a heat wave that made teaching in the small schoolhouse almost unbearable. Rebecca had the children do much of their work outside under the trees, teaching mathematics with sticks and rocks, having them read beneath the shade, practicing their letters with chalk on smooth river stones. The children loved these outdoor lessons, and Rebecca found she did too. Quinton's homestead plans were progressing. He had saved enough money and had spoken to the landowner about purchasing a small parcel near the creek. The ranch owner had agreed to help him with a loan for the remaining amount, impressed by Quinton's hard work and dedication. If everything went according to plan, Quinton would own his own land by September. The evening classes had grown to include 12 students, as word spread about the quality of Rebecca's teaching. Several ranch hands from neighboring properties now made the ride into town twice a week to attend. The school board could not deny the success of the program, even if some board members remained personally disapproving of Rebecca's association with Quinton. One Tuesday evening in mid-August, Rebecca was teaching a lesson about writing business letters when a commotion outside interrupted the class. Shouting, the sound of hooves, and then a gunshot sent everyone to their feet. Quinton immediately moved toward Rebecca. "Stay inside," he commanded, his voice firm but calm. "Everyone stay inside." He went to the window and looked out, then cursed softly. "There are 6 men on horseback shooting up the street. They look drunk." It was every town's nightmare, cowboys on a rampage, liquored up and looking for trouble. Rebecca's heart pounded, not for herself but for Quinton. This was exactly the kind of incident that reinforced the town's prejudices, and Quinton's presence in the schoolhouse during it would only make things worse for him. "Everyone away from the windows," Rebecca ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. "We will wait here until the sheriff deals with them." But the riders seemed to be heading toward the schoolhouse. A moment later, the door burst open and 3 rough-looking men stumbled in, clearly drunk with guns in their hands. "Well, well," one of them slurred. "What do we have here? A school for grown men. That is the funniest thing I have seen all day." "You need to leave," Quinton said calmly, stepping forward. "Right now." The drunk cowboy focused on Quinton with bleary eyes. Who are you to tell me what to do? You are just another ranch hand, same as me. I am someone who knows when to stop drinking and go home, Quinton said evenly. And that time is now. Leave before the sheriff gets here and you end up in jail. One of the other drunk cowboys raised his gun. Maybe I do not want to leave. Maybe I want to teach you some manners. Rebecca watched in fear as the situation escalated, but Quinton remained perfectly calm. He moved slowly, positioning himself between the drunk men and the other students, between Danger and Rebecca. You can shoot me if you want, Quinton said quietly. But then you will hang for murder. Is your pride worth your life? Go home, sleep it off. Tomorrow you will be glad you did. The drunk cowboy with the gun wavered, his alcohol-clouded mind trying to process Quinton's words. His friends were already backing toward the door, some part of their brains recognizing the wisdom in Quinton's advice. Come on, Jake, one of them said. He is right. Let's get out of here before the sheriff comes. Jake lowered his gun slowly. You are lucky, he told Quinton. Real lucky. We are all lucky tonight, Quinton agreed. No one got hurt. That is the best possible outcome. Now go. The three men left, and a moment later Rebecca heard hoofbeats as they rode out of town. Quinton immediately turned to check on everyone. Is anyone hurt? Everyone all right? The students were shaken but unharmed. Rebecca felt her legs trembling with reaction. Quinton had just saved all of them with nothing but calm words and careful positioning. He had put himself in danger to protect them without hesitation. The sheriff arrived moments later, followed by several townsmen. They took statements from everyone, and Quinton explained what had happened in the same calm, measured voice he had used with the drunk cowboys. You handled that well, Blake, the sheriff admitted grudgingly. Could have gone very bad if you had gotten hot-headed about it. After the sheriff left and the other students had been dismissed, Rebecca found herself alone with Quinton in the schoolhouse. The adrenaline that had kept her calm during the crisis suddenly drained away, and she began to shake. Rebecca, Quinton said, and then she was in his arms finally, his strong embrace holding her as she trembled. It is all right, you are safe. Everyone is safe. You could have been killed, Rebecca said into his chest. That man had a gun pointed at you. I was not going to let them hurt you, Quinton said simply. I would have done anything to keep you safe. Rebecca pulled back enough to look up at him. Do you understand now why I love you? Why I do not care what the town thinks? You are brave and calm and good, Quinton Blake. You are everything a man should be. He cupped her face gently in his work-roughened hands. And you are everything to me, my angel, my reason for becoming better. I love you, Rebecca Daniels, and I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you did not make a mistake by loving me back. Then he kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise, and Rebecca felt like she was finally home. They stood together in the quiet schoolhouse, holding each other, and Rebecca knew that everything was going to be all right. She had found the man she wanted to spend her life with, a man who was gentle when the world expected him to be rough, who was controlled when others were wild, who called her his angel and made her feel like she truly was one. The aftermath of the incident brought unexpected changes. The townspeople had witnessed Quinton's calm courage in the face of danger. They had seen him protect the schoolteacher and the other students without resorting to violence, using only his words and his presence to defuse a potentially deadly situation. Even Mrs. Patterson had to admit, albeit grudgingly, that Quinton Blake had acted heroically. The school board called a special meeting, and Mr. Whitmore came to the schoolhouse the next day with surprising news. Miss Daniels, the board has voted unanimously to commend you for the excellent work you have been doing, both with the children and with the evening classes. We also want to acknowledge Mr. Blake's actions last night. He demonstrated exactly the kind of character and restraint that we hope to instill in our community. The board wishes to apologize for any unwarranted concerns expressed about your association with him." Rebecca felt tears of relief well up. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. That means a great deal to both of us." "There is more," Mr. Whitmore continued. "Several of us have been discussing it, and we would like to offer Mr. Blake a position as the schoolhouse caretaker. It would be a paid position, not much, but it would give him additional income and official standing in the community. We should have recognized sooner that his volunteer work maintaining the building was valuable and deserved compensation." Rebecca could hardly believe what she was hearing. "I am sure he will be very grateful for the opportunity." "He is a good man," Mr. Whitmore said, and it sounded like an admission that cost him something. "We were wrong to judge him based solely on his occupation. Character matters more than class, as you tried to tell me. I should have listened sooner." When Rebecca told Quinton the news that evening, he was stunned. "They want to pay me to do what I was already doing for free?" he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "Yes, and more importantly, they are acknowledging publicly that you are a valued member of this community," Rebecca explained. "It changes everything, Quinton. It means we can court properly, openly, without fear of judgment." Quinton's face broke into a huge smile. "Does this mean I can take you to the church social on Saturday and walk you home from the schoolhouse without worrying about causing you trouble? And maybe, eventually, ask you to marry me without everyone thinking you are making a terrible mistake?" "Yes to all of that," Rebecca said, her own smile matching his. "Though you have not actually asked me to marry you yet." "I want to wait until I close on the land," Quinton said. "I want to be able to offer you a real home, not just dreams and promises. But soon, Rebecca. Very soon, I will ask you properly, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." "I could never regret anything about loving you," Rebecca said softly. The church social on Saturday was a revelation. Quinton arrived at the boarding house in clean clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers much larger than the first one he had brought to the schoolhouse. Mrs. Thornton answered the door and actually smiled at him. "Good evening, Mr. Blake. I will tell Miss Daniels you are here." The social was held in the churchyard, with tables set up under the trees and lanterns hanging from the branches. There was food contributed by various families, lemonade and cider, and a fiddle player providing music. Quinton and Rebecca arrived together, and while there were a few raised eyebrows, most people smiled and nodded greetings. Sarah and her parents approached them immediately. "Miss Daniels, Mr. Blake, we are so glad to see you both here together," Sarah's father said warmly. "It is about time this town recognized what Sarah has been telling us all along, that Mr. Blake is one of the finest men in Evanston." Other families followed, offering congratulations and support. Even Mrs. Patterson managed a stiff nod of acknowledgement, though she did not go so far as to actually apologize for her previous attitude. Rebecca did not care. She had Quinton beside her, open and acknowledged, and that was all that mattered. They danced together to the fiddle music, Quinton's hand warm on her waist, and Rebecca felt happier than she had ever been in her life. This was what she had come west for, even if she had not known it at the time. A place where she could be herself, do meaningful work, and love a good man without pretense or social restrictions. "I never thought I would be dancing at a church social," Quinton admitted quietly as they moved together. "I never thought I would be welcome at something like this, much less with the prettiest girl in town on my arm." "You are exactly where you belong," Rebecca assured him. "We both are." September arrived with cooler weather and the promise of autumn. Quinton's land purchase was finalized, and he officially became the owner of 40 acres along the creek, with a small cabin that needed work but was livable. He spent every spare moment improving the property, fixing the cabin roof, repairing fences, preparing for the future he hoped to build there. The evening classes continued, though Quinton now read and wrote well enough that he was helping some of the newer students. Rebecca watched with pride as he patiently explained grammar rules or helped someone sound out difficult words. He had come so far in just 6 months. On a crisp October evening, after the evening class had ended and the other students had left, Quinton asked Rebecca to take a walk with him. She grabbed her shawl and they walked together through the town, now openly holding hands, toward the path that led to his new property. "I want to show you something," Quinton said, his voice nervous in a way Rebecca rarely heard. They walked to his homestead, where the cabin stood solid against the darkening sky. Quinton had clearly been working hard. The roof was repaired, new shutters hung on the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney. He led her inside, and Rebecca gasped. The interior was simple but clean and cozy. There was a wood stove for cooking, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and in the corner, a bed frame waiting for a mattress. But what caught Rebecca's attention was the bookshelf Quinton had built along one wall, already holding the books he had been collecting. "I built the bookshelf for you," Quinton said softly, "because I know how much you love books, and I made sure the window by the table faces east, so you will have good light for reading in the mornings. And there is room out back for a garden, and the creek is close enough that we will always have fresh water, and I know it is not much compared to what you are used to, but—" Rebecca stopped his words by kissing him. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. "It is perfect. Everything about it is perfect." Quinton took both her hands in his, and Rebecca saw that he was trembling. "Rebecca Daniels, you came into my life like an angel and made me believe I could be more than what I was. You taught me to read and write, yes, but more than that, you taught me that I was worthy of love and respect. You stood by me when the whole town warned you away. You saw the man I was trying to become instead of the rough, wild cowboy they expected me to be. I love you more than I have words to express, even with all the words you have taught me. Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home and let me spend the rest of my life making sure you know how precious you are?" "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "Yes, Quinton Blake, I will marry you. I love you with all my heart." He pulled out a simple gold ring, clearly not expensive but chosen with care. "I know it is not fancy," he said as he slipped it onto her finger, "but it is real gold, and it is a promise that I will love you faithfully for all my days." "It is beautiful," Rebecca said, admiring how the ring caught the firelight. "And you are beautiful, inside and out. I am the luckiest woman in the world." They stood in the cabin that would soon be their home, holding each other close, and Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Boston seeking freedom and purpose, warned that cowboys were rough and wild and dangerous. Instead, she had found Quinton, who was gentle and calm and safe. He called her his angel, but he was the blessing in her life, the unexpected gift that made everything else worthwhile. They set the wedding date for late November, giving them time to prepare the cabin and for Rebecca to finish the school term before Christmas. The town rallied around them with surprising enthusiasm. Sarah's father built them a proper bed. Mrs. Chen sewed Rebecca a wedding dress from cream-colored silk. Even Mrs. Patterson contributed a set of dishes, though she could not resist commenting that they were quite fine for a cowboy's wife. Rebecca just smiled. She was going to be a cowboy's wife, but not the kind the town had warned her about. She was going to marry a man who was gentle and kind, who had worked hard to better himself, who treated her like she was precious. She was going to marry her best friend, her student, her love. The wedding took place on a cold but clear November day in the small church, packed with townspeople who had come to celebrate. Quinton stood at the altar in a new suit, looking nervous and impossibly handsome. Rebecca walked down the aisle in her cream silk dress, carrying a bouquet of late-season wildflowers that Quinton had somehow found for her. "You look like an angel," Quinton whispered when she reached his side, his eyes shining with emotion. "And you look like the man I am going to love for the rest of my life," Rebecca whispered back. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed Rebecca with a tenderness that made several people in the congregation sigh with approval. The reception was held in the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Rebecca danced with Quinton, with her students both young and adult, with townspeople who had become friends. She laughed and celebrated and felt the joy of knowing she had found exactly where she belonged. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Quinton and Rebecca slipped away to their cabin. He carried her over the threshold, and they stood together in their home, finally alone as husband and wife. "I never dreamed I could be this happy," Quinton said, holding Rebecca close. "You gave me everything, Angel. Education, respect, love, a future. I will spend every day making sure you know how grateful I am." "You gave me everything too," Rebecca said. "You gave me purpose, community, adventure, and a love deeper than anything I ever imagined. We saved each other, Quinton." "We both did." They spent their first night as husband and wife in their little cabin, talking and laughing and planning their future together. Quinton told Rebecca his dreams of expanding the homestead, maybe raising a few cattle, definitely keeping chickens for eggs. Rebecca told him about her hope to continue teaching, at least until they had children of their own. "How many children do you want?" Quinton asked, his hand gentle on her face. "As many as we are blessed with," Rebecca said. "I want our home to be full of love and laughter and little feet running across these floors." "Then that is what we will have," Quinton promised. "Everything you want, everything you dream of, I will work every day to give you. You have already given me everything I need," Rebecca assured him. "You have given me yourself." The winter passed in quiet happiness. Rebecca continued teaching at the schoolhouse, and Quinton worked at the ranch while also improving their homestead. The evening classes had expanded so much that they now met 3 times a week, with Rebecca training some of her more advanced students to help teach the newer ones. Quinton was one of these assistant teachers, patient and encouraging with men who struggled with their letters the way he once had. In February, Rebecca realized she was expecting their first child. She told Quinton on a snowy evening as they sat by their fireplace, and he reacted with such pure joy that she fell in love with him all over again. "A baby," he said in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Quinton said. "Terrified, yes. I never had a father who showed me how to do it right. But happy, Angel, I am so happy I could burst with it." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Rebecca assured him. "You are already wonderful with the children at the schoolhouse. You are patient and kind and gentle. Our child will be so lucky to have you." Quinton pulled her close, his heart beating strong and steady beneath her ear. "I promise to be the kind of father my child can be proud of. I promise to raise them with love and knowledge and the understanding that they can be anything they want to be, just like you taught me." Spring arrived with the promise of new life in more ways than one. Rebecca's pregnancy progressed smoothly. though she had to stop teaching in May as she grew too large to comfortably stand for long periods. The school board assured her that her position would be waiting for her when she was ready to return, a promise that would have been unthinkable before she arrived in Evanston. Sarah, now 13 and one of Rebecca's best students, stepped in as a temporary teacher for the younger children with Rebecca's guidance. It gave Rebecca pride to see her student taking on such responsibility and doing well. In early June, as the cottonwoods along the creek burst into full leaf, Rebecca went into labor. Quinton rode for the doctor and then paced outside the cabin like a caged animal while Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Thornton attended to Rebecca inside. After hours of labor, as the sun set on a beautiful summer evening, Rebecca delivered a healthy baby boy. When Quinton was finally allowed inside and placed his son in his arms for the first time, Rebecca saw tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Quinton whispered in awe. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without settling on one. But looking at her husband holding their son with such tender reverence, Rebecca knew exactly what the baby's name should be. "James," she said. "James Quinton Blake. We will call him James, after your father, but with your name as well, because you are the man our son will learn from. You will show him how to be gentle and kind in a world that expects men to be rough and wild." Quinton looked up at her with so much love that Rebecca felt her heart might overflow. "James Quinton Blake," he repeated. "That is a good, strong name for our son." The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Quinton proved to be a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James when he cried, singing lullabies in his deep voice that always seemed to soothe the baby. Rebecca watched him with their son and fell even more deeply in love. In September, when James was 3 months old, Rebecca returned to teaching part-time. Mrs. Chen watched the baby during school hours, and Rebecca would nurse him during her lunch break. It was exhausting but fulfilling, and Rebecca found she loved both parts of her life, teaching and motherhood. Quinton had been promoted to foreman at the Triple Creek Ranch, a position of trust and responsibility that came with better pay. He used the additional money to improve their homestead further, adding a room to the cabin that would serve as a nursery for James and any future children. On their second wedding anniversary, Rebecca told Quinton she was expecting again. This time, his reaction was pure confidence. "I am ready," he said, pulling her close. "I know what I am doing now." "Well, mostly," he grinned. "At least I know which end of the baby to diaper." Their daughter was born in April of 1881, another smooth delivery that resulted in a healthy baby girl with her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's dark hair. They named her Grace Rebecca Blake. "For the grace that brought us together," Quinton explained as he cradled his daughter, "and for the angel who saved me and gave me this beautiful life." Watching Quinton with their 2 children, Rebecca reflected on how wrong the town women had been with their warnings. They had told her cowboys were rough and wild, that she should avoid them, especially Quinton Blake with his quiet intensity. But Quinton had turned out to be the gentlest man she had ever known, a devoted husband and father who treated his family with tenderness and respect. He still called her his angel, especially in quiet moments when the children were asleep, and they sat together by the fireplace, planning their future and reflecting on how far they had come. The years flowed by like the creek that ran through their property. James grew into a bright, curious boy who loved books as much as his mother. Grace was quieter, more thoughtful, with her father's calm presence and gentle nature. In 1883, Rebecca gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and David, who brought chaos and laughter into the household. The cabin had to be expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. Quinton, with help from friends and students, added 2 more rooms and a proper front porch where Rebecca could sit in her rocking chair and watch the children play. The homestead grew as well, with cattle grazing on their land and a large garden that provided vegetables for their table and extra to sell in town. Rebecca continued teaching, though she reduced her hours as their family grew. The evening classes had become a permanent institution in Evanston, now meeting in a building the town had constructed specifically for adult education. Quinton still helped teach, sharing his own story of transformation through education to inspire the students. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Rebecca and Quinton took a rare evening alone together, leaving the 4 children with Sarah, who was now 22 and engaged to be married herself. They rode out to the spot where Quinton had proposed, where the cabin now stood expanded and surrounded by the life they had built. "You remember when I first asked you to teach me to read?" Quinton asked, his arm around Rebecca's waist as they looked at the home they had created. "I remember a nervous cowboy standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse, hat in hand, asking for something most men would be too proud to request," Rebecca said. "I remember thinking you were different from what I had been warned about." "They told you cowboys were rough and wild," Quinton remembered with a smile. "They did," Rebecca agreed, "but mine was gentle and called me his angel, and he gave me everything I ever wanted: love, partnership, purpose, and a family that fills my heart to bursting every single day." "You are still my angel," Quinton said softly. "Every morning when I wake up next to you, every time I see you with our children, every time you smile at me across the dinner table, I thank God that you walked into that schoolhouse on that day in 1878. You changed my life in every possible way." "You changed mine too," Rebecca said. "I came west looking for freedom and found love. I expected loneliness and found home. I was warned about danger and found safety in your arms." They stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the same colors that had filled the sky on the evening of their first walk together. 4 children played in the cabin behind them, living proof of the love they shared. The creek ran steadily past, constant and sure, like their commitment to each other. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Quinton asked. "More of this," Rebecca said contentedly. "More love, more laughter, more challenges we will face together. More years of you calling me your angel and me telling you that you are the best man I have ever known. Growing old together, watching our children grow and have children of their own. Teaching those grandchildren to read and write and treat others with kindness. That is the future I see, and it is more beautiful than anything I ever dreamed." "That sounds perfect," Quinton agreed, "though you forgot one thing." "What is that?" "Making sure our children and grandchildren know that love is not about social class or occupation, or what other people think is proper. It is about finding someone whose heart matches yours, whose character proves their worth, whose gentleness makes you feel safe even when the world is rough and wild." Rebecca turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 11 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "Yes," she agreed. "That is the most important lesson of all." As the years continued to pass, the Blake family became a cornerstone of Evanston. Quinton eventually left the ranch to focus full-time on their homestead and his work with adult education. Rebecca became the head teacher at the schoolhouse, training other teachers and developing curriculum that was used throughout the territory. James grew up to become a teacher himself, following in his mother's footsteps. Grace married a kind young man who worked at the general store and gave Rebecca and Quinton their first grandchild, a daughter named Rebecca, in 1898. The twins, Daniel and David, both became ranchers, taking over management of the expanded Blake homestead. In 1900, when Rebecca and Quinton celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary, they had 4 children, 3 grandchildren, and another on the way. They sat on their porch in rocking chairs that Quinton had built, watching their grown children and grandchildren play in the yard. "Do you ever regret it?" Quinton asked, a question he had asked many times over the years. Marrying a cowboy instead of one of those suitable gentlemen back in Boston, Rebecca's answer was always the same. Not for a single moment. "You gave me a life filled with real love, real purpose, and real happiness. Those suitable gentlemen could never have given me that. You gave me everything," Quinton said, reaching for her hand. "You believed in me when no one else did. You saw past the prejudices and the warnings and the narrow-minded thinking. You called me gentle when the world expected me to be rough, controlled when they expected me to be wild. You loved me for who I was and who I could become. And you called me your angel," Rebecca said softly, squeezing his hand. "From the very beginning, you treated me like I was precious and worthy of respect. You worked hard to build this life for us. You have been a devoted husband and a loving father. You have taught our children that education matters, that kindness matters, that character matters more than class." Little Rebecca, their first grandchild, ran up to the porch holding a wildflower. "Grandpa, I picked this for Grandma because you always say she is your angel and angels should have flowers." Quinton lifted the 3-year-old into his lap, his movements still strong despite his 46 years. "That is exactly right, sweetheart. Your grandma is my angel, and she has been since the day we met. Tell me the story, Grandpa," little Rebecca begged, "about how you and Grandma fell in love." Quinton looked at Rebecca with a smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "Well, it starts with a schoolhouse and a cowboy who wanted to learn to read." As Quinton told their story to his granddaughter, with Rebecca adding details and corrections, the sun set over their Wyoming homestead. The creek ran past, the cattle grazed in the fields, and the sound of family laughter filled the air. Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From that first stagecoach ride into Evanston when the town women had warned her about rough, wild cowboys. She had been so young then, so uncertain despite her confidence, so unaware that the warnings were based on prejudice rather than truth. She had found Quinton Blake, a man who defied every stereotype, who proved that gentleness and strength could coexist, that education and hard work could transform a person's life, that love could bridge any social divide. He had called her his angel, but really, they had saved each other. She had given him knowledge and opportunity. He had given her purpose and unconditional love. Their marriage had weathered challenges over the years. Financial struggles in the early days, illness, the normal friction of 2 strong-willed people learning to share a life. But they had faced everything together, with patience and communication and unfailing commitment to each other. Now, watching Quinton with their grandchild, seeing the legacy they had built together in their children and this homestead and the community they had helped strengthen, Rebecca felt profound gratitude. This life, this love, this family, it was everything she had never known she wanted until she found it. "Are you happy, Grandma?" little Rebecca asked when Quinton finished his story. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Rebecca answered honestly. "I have a husband who loves me, children who make me proud, grandchildren who fill my heart with joy, and a life filled with purpose and meaning. What more could anyone want?" "Grandpa calls you his angel," the little girl observed. "But what do you call him?" Rebecca looked at Quinton, at the gray now threading through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, at the strong, capable hands that had built their home and held their children and touched her with such tender love for over 2 decades. "I call him mine," Rebecca said simply. "My love, my partner, my best friend, my home. I call him the best decision I ever made and the greatest blessing of my life." Quinton reached across the space between their rocking chairs and took her hand, his grip still strong and sure. "We were blessed the day we found each other," he said. "We were," Rebecca agreed. "They warned me cowboys were rough and wild, but mine was gentle and called me his angel, and in return he became my whole world." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the family gathered for the evening meal, 3 generations sitting around the long table Quinton had built years ago. There was laughter and conversation, and the comfortable chaos of a large, loving family. After the meal, after the grandchildren had been settled for bed, and their own children had departed to their own homes, Rebecca and Quinton sat together on their porch one more time, watching the stars emerge in full glory. 22 years, Quinton mused. "And I love you more now than I did on our wedding day." "That is because love grows," Rebecca said wisely. "It deepens with shared experiences, strengthens through challenges overcome together, expands with each new blessing we receive. The love we have now is built on 2 decades of partnership and perseverance." "I am so grateful you gave me a chance," Quinton said. "I am grateful you looked past the warnings and the prejudice and saw the man I was trying to be." "I am grateful you had the courage to walk into that schoolhouse and ask for help," Rebecca countered. "I am grateful for your gentleness and your kind heart and your devotion to our family. I am grateful for every single day we have had together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, hearts united, watching the same stars that had watched over them since that first evening so many years ago. The ranch was quiet now, settling into night, but inside the cabin and scattered throughout Evanston, their legacy lived on. In the children they had raised, in the students they had taught, in the example they had set of what love could be when it was based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Rebecca thought about the teacher who had arrived in Evanston in 1878, full of determination and hope, but also fear and uncertainty. She thought about the cowboy who had been warned against, judged unfairly, seen as rough and wild when he was actually gentle and thoughtful. She thought about how they had found each other despite all the obstacles, how they had built a life together that exceeded anything either of them had imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Quinton asked, attuned as always to her moods. "About how right everything turned out," Rebecca said. "About how wrong the warnings were. About how grateful I am that I trusted my own judgment instead of listening to people who did not know you. About how our love story defied expectations and created something beautiful. Our children will tell this story to their children," Quinton predicted. About how Grandpa was just a cowboy who wanted to learn to read, and Grandma was the angel teacher who believed in him. About how love conquered prejudice and built a dynasty. "Dynasty might be overstating it," Rebecca said with a laugh. "I do not think so," Quinton disagreed. "Look at what we have created. Not just children and grandchildren, but a legacy of education and kindness, and the belief that anyone can better themselves if they are given a chance. That is worth something, Rebecca. That matters." "It does matter," Rebecca agreed. "We mattered. We made a difference, both separately and together." As the night deepened and the air grew cool, they finally went inside to their bedroom, the same room where they had spent their wedding night so many years ago. The cabin had grown around this original structure, expanding as their family expanded, but this room remained the heart of their home. "Angel," Quinton said softly as they prepared for bed, using the endearment that had never lost its power to move her. "Yes, my love. Thank you for everything. For believing in me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a reason to be better than I was, for seeing gentle where others saw dangerous, for seeing potential where others saw limitations. Thank you for being my angel and letting me be your partner." Rebecca crossed to him and wrapped her arms around her husband of 22 years. "Thank you for being exactly who you are, for proving that the warnings were wrong, that cowboys are not all rough and wild, that some are gentle and kind and capable of deep, abiding love. Thank you for calling me your angel and treating me like I was precious every single day. Thank you for being mine." They held each other in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, two people who had beaten the odds and built something lasting. Outside, the Wyoming night wrapped around their homestead, protective and peaceful. The creek whispered its constant song. The cattle settled in the fields. The stars watched over everything, as they had watched over an angel teacher and a gentle cowboy from the very beginning. And somewhere in the vastness of the western sky, among all those stars, their love story was written in light that would never fade, a testament to the power of looking beyond prejudice, of believing in possibilities, of choosing love even when the world warns against it. They had defied expectations and created a legacy that would endure for generations, all because a teacher saw past the cowboy exterior to the gentle man within, and a cowboy called her his angel and meant it with every fiber of his being. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. And it all began with a simple request to learn to read and a simple act of saying yes.